when you are in a position of leadership, you have a lot of influence and power over the people that are in your care, right? Like whatever let's say you were reporting to me.
Correct.
And I'm making decisions that are either to your detriment or I'm treating you bad. Not only does that affect you as a person, but when you go home, that's going to affect your loved ones that are in your realm.
Welcome to Life Chapters, and today's guest is a mom of two young teenagers, a wife, and a Latina businesswoman. She is currently in leadership consulting, but that's not where she started. Let's dig in on the chapters and figure out how she got there. Sandra, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Man, it's a pleasure. We've had many conversations that led to this moment. Now, let's unravel some of the chapters. Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing? Like, where were you born and your childhood, parents, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So I was born and raised in San Diego.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So always been somewhere in San Diego throughout my whole life. Never lived anywhere else. My parents were originally from Colombia.
Okay.
And so they came over before I was, like I say, before I was a twinkle in my dad's eye.
Okay.
And they landed on the East Coast, actually.
Where in the East Coast?
They were in Boston. So actually, my older sister was born in Boston.
Okay.
And then I was started in Boston
Mhm.
because my mom traveled over here pregnant, but I
Okay.
was born here in San Diego.
Okay. You mentioned you have an older sister.
Yeah.
How many siblings do you have?
So we're a total of 6. My dad has his own Brady Bunch.
Okay.
But between my mom and my dad, there's 3 of us, my older sister and then myself. And then I have a younger brother.
Very nice. And your younger brother and you were born here, but you were made pretty much in
Right.
the East Coast. Okay.
Yeah. And my brother is full San Diegan.
I like that. Okay. Now, what is one habit that you picked up earlier on that started shaping you the next chapters for you?
It's interesting. It's funny because I don't know. I think it shaped in some form and then unraveled later in that my parents, but particularly my dad, was always very entrepreneurial.
Oh,
Like he
nice.
still is today.
Okay.
But growing up, like it was being in my parents' business, like going and like playing in the like underneath the shelves while they were actually doing work. Like that's how I grew up. But what I say is like that didn't necessarily form immediately in the next chapters because I was very like corporate, 9 to 5,
Got it.
quote unquote stability.
Yeah.
So I didn't have that same bug to be an entrepreneur until much later in life. So I think it's like the foundation was there early on, but I didn't adopt it until much later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what made you have the mindset of corporate, even though your parents were already like entrepreneurs and that's how you started, your upbringing? But why that though?
So that's a really good question because I think the answer to that actually informs a lot of things of not only my journey, but also the way that I help other people. In that I think there's a fundamental flaw in the way that our education system has traditionally worked in that like you get a syllabus. And
Yeah.
you take these classes and you take these tests and you either get an A or you get a lower grade. And if you get an A, that's success. But if you get anything else, that's like either pretty good or subpar. That's the measurement, right?
Got it.
And what I mean by like it's fundamentally flawed is that that's not really the way the world works, right? It's not, you don't get a job and they give you a list of things to do and you do them perfectly and then you get promoted or you get a raise. Like, but that's the way that we are trained to think is like, okay, I'm going to go here and I'm going to do what's being asked of me. And then I'm going to graduate to the next grade. Like that's just the way that we are conditioned to think, but that's not the real world. That has never been my experience or what I've seen in others is it's also about relationships and it's also about taking ownership and it's also a multitude of things like your own circumstances. I think I was always a very good student. Like I was a traditionally straight A student and very kind of programmed to like, you do what you're supposed to do, and then that's going to lead you to success. And I think that translated very well to corporate, right? It's like, I'm going to go and I'm going to get a good job and I'm going to get a good title.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of what propelled me into that. And
God.
being an entrepreneur is not that, right? Like there's a whole lot of gray area and there's a whole lot of uncertainty. And I think being a good student led me into a different path early
Okay.
on.
Now, you mentioned that your parents are from Colombia and you guys were born here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your parents being in entrepreneurship earlier on, because what I know from people that are raised or born in other countries, everyone has like a little store in the corner. Everybody is doing whatever it takes to work for themselves at an earlier stage in life. And you're mentioning that in the US, it's all about, you're getting the syllabus, they do this to get to the next grade, so on and so forth, that it takes us and it shapes us to that mentality of going into corporate. Now, did you have to unlearn?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that that's my story. I wouldn't say like blanket,
Correct.
like anybody coming from another country is going to be an entrepreneur and anybody that's raised here is going to go into corporate. But that was my experience, my journey. And then your question was, did I have to unlearn something? Yeah, I had to unlearn that that's not the way the real world works. And it took me like literally decades of like running that same little rat race and expecting that my hard work was going to be noticed and that doing a good job was going to be good enough, where I feel like that is essentially what I had to unlearn. Is like, it was never kind of like, what's the story with the Wizard of Oz, that Dorothy always had? She always had the power, right?
Yeah.
That's it. Like, that's what I had to unlearn, is like, other people don't have the power. I always had the power.
Yeah.
Like it was always within me, but I was like outsourcing it or delegating it to other people. So that's what took me many, many, many years to unlearn.
Okay. Now, it sounds like you were doing the rat race for many years until you had to unlearn this. Now, if you can think, is there a chapter in your life that you were like, man, that was a struggle?
Yeah. So I think almost all of us have some version of their own COVID story, right?
True.
Like it was a traumatic experience, I think, for most of us. Like whether you're a little kid or a full grown adult, like there was some level of, I would say, trauma in that whole experience. But mine was that I was at work in a position of people leadership. I also had 2 young children that were at home and suddenly needing to be homeschooled, right? Because everybody was doing, not necessarily homeschooled, but remote learning. A husband that was also, at home, where normally he's not at home, he's working outside of the home. And then during that particular chapter, which was not always the case, my mom for many years lived with my sister, but right before COVID, my mom moved in with us. Like that was a time that she was with us.
Okay.
So the challenge during all of that time, or like sort of the toughest part for me, was that everything bubbled up right in that same period of time where I felt like I'm not being a good wife. I'm not being a good mother. I'm not being a good employee / leader. I'm not being a good daughter. It's like I'm failing literally, like literally at there's not one thing that I'm doing right. And it started off by like, not only the kids are at home and have to balance work and being able to pay attention to them and their schoolwork, but also a bunch of people at work and on my team were essentially overnight laid off.
Wow.
Because of the uncertainty and, like right, wrong, or otherwise, like that's just what happened. But part of the programming that I had is just like, okay, well, I'm in a leadership position. I need to make sure that our customers are taken care of, right? But it was like, it was still 100% of the work with like, I don't know, maybe 60% of the workforce for what we were doing, which was project management at the time. And I remember early on, like waking up at 4 a.m. and starting my work day. Like that's not a normal thing, but there was so much work and I for whatever stupid reason, thought like it was my responsibility. Like I have to just do it because
Mhm.
I'm still here and there's still work to be done. It was just like that whole traumatic experience, which I try actually not to think about too much,
Mhm.
is probably like the culmination of like questioning so many things. Like, why am I doing this? If, I didn't dream as a little girl, I want to do software implementations and I want to manage projects and people are going to like, that was not my dream. Right. And so I'm
Mhm.
like, so why am I killing myself over this thing that I'm not even passionate about, right? Like if it was for my family or my kids, I'm like, yeah, I had a family, I love my children. For them, I will sacrifice.
Yeah.
But for something that wasn't even like, I mean, we weren't saving lives, right? It's not like it would even be different, I think, for me if I was like a doctor or a nurse
Mhm.
and people's lives literally depend on me, right? But no one's going to die because they didn't get their
Yeah.
software implemented.
Okay. So it seems like during this time frame, you were being pulled from one side for the kids, the husband,
Mhm.
the job, you, family, etc. How did you get over it? Like, was there like a mindset shift for you to be like, you know, I'm done with this and I'm focusing on like how did
Mhm.
that you get over it?
It was gradual, and now in retrospect, I realize it a lot more than, like, actually when it was happening,
Mm.
because how it started was like, "No, I'm not passionate about this. No, I don't wanna go to an early grave because I'm stressing over this
Yeah.
thing," like, 'cause it's not, again, not life-saving.
Mhm.
What is it that I wanna do? And so it started with a little bit of self-discovery. What do I wanna do? And in that moment, and sort of what set the trajectory for leadership is, and I'm not blaming anyone because nobody knew what was happening during COVID. Everyone was sort of guessing and trying to make responsible decisions, but it also helped me realize like when you are in a position of leadership, you have a lot of influence and power over the people that are in your care, right?
Mhm.
Like whatever let's say you were reporting to me
Correct.
and I'm making decisions that are either to your detriment or I'm treating you bad. Not only does that affect you as a
Mhm.
person, but when you go home, that's going to affect your loved ones that are in your realm.
Mhm.
If you have a spouse, if you have children, whatever it is, like the people that are most close to you are going to get a ripple effect of whatever you've experienced in your work life. And more employees, the larger the organization, the larger the ripple effect, which was the very beginning where I was like, oh, okay, like there's a lot that can be done here. And most people in a position of leadership, I don't necessarily believe realize the amount of impact that they can have on like individual people and communities, really.
Mhm.
So I started educating myself in executive coaching. That's kind of how it
Okay.
started. So I started because I wanted to be a better leader. Like I started because I wanted to develop myself and
Mhm.
my skills. And the more I got into it, I'm like, oh, like people in their own journeys with their own development. It was a very, very gradual process that really started with me doing some reflection. Like I would say conversations. I wasn't talking to myself, right? But like actually having some awareness and kind of taking stock of where I was spending my time and why and
Mm.
what were my priorities. And then ultimately that kind of flourished into wow, I can actually help other people that are in a similar challenging position or kind of trying to figure out what it is that they really want to do or do what they're doing in a better way.
Mhm.
That's how it sort of all started based off that
Mm.
chapter.
Got it. Now, it seems like having people that you lead and the way that you lead them, sometimes when people are not properly trained, they don't look at education to become better leaders and adapt to different people. Because
Hmm.
when you're leading someone, one person versus the other, there might be two different styles of
Yeah.
leadership.
Yep.
Now, what kind of training did you take, education to become a better leader, to start reducing the ripple effect that can come from the leader all the way down to like, the families and
Mm.
so on and so forth?
So I think that for me, the foundation actually came from my own experience being an employee, because I always said, I think I learned how to be a good leader mostly by the bad leaders that I had. So I can remember like one of my very first bosses in a real corporate job was
Mm-hmm.
like not great. Like
A
she
little
was
bit about that.
I would say she was a good person, but she was not well trained or prepared to lead people. So it was a lot of micromanaging, a lot of keeping control of the team, a
Okay.
lot of just ways that were counterproductive, that did not build a whole lot of trust, didn't build a whole lot of people actually wanting to do good work. A lot of fear tactics. I mean, I could go on and on and on,
Yeah.
right? And again, like I don't take that as a reflection of whether she was a good or bad person. It was just that's probably the way that she was developed. And she probably had leaders over her in the past that like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's the way you're supposed to do it. Like you're supposed to micromanage things. You're supposed to control. Like
Okay.
that was her lived experience, right? That I'm assuming. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. That was one of them, right? And
Okay.
then kind of going into software implementations, the consulting world, a lot of that was, and I wouldn't just say one, a lot of leaders that were, and I use the term leaders loosely, but people that used fear tactics and
Okay.
intimidation, and we want these results, and so we're going to put the fear of God in
Can
people.
you give me an example of what that fear is from your experience, or maybe you heard it from another employee or leader?
Mhm.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, I mean, like I literally remember one scenario where there was a backlog of administrative work that needed to be done,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in professional services, in consulting, much like think of it like a lawyer, right? A lawyer bills by the hour or fractions of an hour. So
Mm-hmm.
people are incentivized by doing billable work, right? So the same thing in professional service historically is like your performance is based off how much billable work you do, which means that there's a lot of administrative type things that
Mm-hmm.
if it's not billable, people are not going to focus on it because that's not how graded, if you
Yeah.
will. So there was a backlog of, I don't even remember what kind of work, but it was a lot of administrative work. And one of the partners at the time was like, opened up like a large, like town halls type meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And he had told me, I think it was right before that meeting or right after. I don't remember the timing of it, but the point of it was he said, okay, if this isn't done by the end of the week, I'm having everyone come in here on the weekend and you guys are going to work through the weekend and you're going to do it. Right.
Mm.
And what he told me behind closed doors is like, I'm not really going to do that, but that's what's going to motivate people to do the work. That's a small example, right? Like it's one that it gave me like a little peek behind the curtain of
Mm-hmm.
like the way that he operated specifically, right? It was like, it was to me, it was like, it was dishonest. It was using fear as a tactic to motivate people to do a certain thing. And it was just like a small sampling of the way he operated with people, right? It wasn't about actually helping them become better employees or
Mm-hmm.
actually being transparent of like why something was important. It was just like, I need this done and I'm going to use whatever tactics I need to.
Okay.
So that's one like small example that
Got
I
it.
remember.
Okay. So fear tactics. Now you were in corporate
Mhm.
and now you're in consulting to help everyone that is in some sort of leadership position or wanting to be a leader learn better tactics to properly address employees so the job gets done
Mhm.
and the employees actually get better and want to work for that leader. Now, in corporate and your transition to being a businesswoman, did you just decide one day and you just quit everything and started, or how was that transition from corporate into a business?
It wasn't like an on and off switch. It was building while working, right? Like, so
Mm,
being in a full time job, building the shell of a company, starting to build relationships, some of those foundational things. It was also a time where there was a little bit of a disconnect in the corporate role that I had, right? Because I wasn't bought into it anymore.
okay.
And so I sort of became a version of myself. Like I would not say like I was doing my duties as an employee, I was doing what needed to be done, but I was doing it in my own style. So I think it started like ruffling a few feathers, right? It's like, no, fall in line, do what I tell you, kind of operate in the same way, which I didn't. So it was sort of like a phase where almost like a bad breakup, right? It's like, you know that it's not working and I know that it's not working, but we're making it work and we're kind of forcing the things. And it was very apparent to both sides, right? Like this
Mm-hmm.
isn't working anymore. So I call it an intentional phase out, right? Because it was also a time where like people were being laid off. And I knew that I was like an easy one for them to lay off. But the process was being drawn out. So I took the initiative to like set something up with HR. I'm like, you want me out? I don't want to be here anymore. Like I didn't use those words, right? But
Yeah.
like I forced it. And, so that was like the first stage, right? Was like
Mm-hmm.
I staged what I knew was going to be my layoff because if I quit on my own, I was starting from scratch, right? But I knew that if I got laid off, I would get something for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would get like a little bit of a cushion, a little bit of a time. So I I think of it as like a strategic way that I laid myself off. It was like I'm not gonna I'm not gonna quit on my own and then like
Mm-hmm.
be like not have any benefits, not have anything. It was strategic on my part, but I also think is like the me from maybe 2 or 3 years prior to that, like, would not have even thought of it. Like, I would not have
Okay.
thought to do that. I would have just been like, "I hate this. I'm gonna quit," kinda
Mm-hmm.
thing. But then I got to the point where I was like, "No, right, like, why would I do that? I can still have some level of impact and some level of benefit from this engagement, if you
Mm-hmm.
will." And then, um I thought about it a little bit more logically, I guess, than just the emotion of like, I hate it here. I don't want to be here. I kind
Yeah.
of leave kind of thing. So that was part of it. That was part of it. And from there, just building off of what I had already started doing, the momentum that I had started having even before leaving that job. And then I had a former boss reach out to me that needed help in her role, but it was like a temporary thing.
Okay.
So I went back to corporate for a little bit, but it kind of had like it had limits, right? Like this is going to be a year long
Mm-hmm.
thing. I was still able to kind of nurture the business, if you
Okay.
will. And so all of that played really well into the foundation of what I'm continuing to do. But, and I know this may be like one of your other
Mm-hmm.
questions, but it really is why I do what I do now is say I help people design work that works for them,
Okay.
right? Which is what I feel I did, right? Is I designed different income streams, different situations, different organizational relationships that work for me and my family circumstances
Mm-hmm.
versus saying, okay, if I would have stayed in that role where I was, I'm like, okay, I'm going to make partner and I'm going to do this. It was that would have been very tied to the priorities and the goals of that firm, not necessarily my life. And now that shift is really, okay, no, I know what works best for me and my family and my time and my mental health and who I want to help. That's what I've essentially designed for myself is work that works for me and that brings me satisfaction. And I really want that for other people,
Mm-hmm.
right? To kind of lift the veil and be like, you can do what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it might not just be like overnight necessarily, but if you're not happy doing what you're doing, if you're not getting fulfillment, or if it's taking away from, like you want to go to the school play or, your kids' softball game or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is, right? And you're not doing it because you feel like you're tied to a certain role. Like you have the power to change that and you're not tied into any one thing. It's just a matter of being intentional about what you're trying to do.
Mm. I like that. I like that a lot that you help a lot of people structure their own passion around themselves and their family. Because a lot of the times when we work for someone else, maybe we're passionate, maybe we're not, maybe we're just there for a paycheck. And because we need that paycheck every first and 15th,
Mm,
for example, we miss our kids' play, their soccer games and a lot of important dates because, like you mentioned earlier, that fear. If you don't come today, don't even
mm-hmm.
show up again. And maybe they're being serious, maybe not. But as an employee, because I was also there, you feel like it's true.
Mm.
So therefore you avoid
Well,
things.
that's the thing too, is like there doesn't even have to be anyone saying, if
Mhm.
you don't show up, don't come back.
Mm.
Sometimes we make that story up in our own head
That is
and we
true.
make that fact when it's not. Sometimes it is like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with corporate, right?
Mhm.
Like if that's where you thrive and that's where you feel safe, great. But how can you even make that work for you? Right?
Mhm.
Don't assume that there's these unwritten rules of what you're supposed to do and not supposed to do,
Mm.
unless they are literally written. Or, I mean, I'm not saying do anything crazy. Oftentimes we make a story up in our own head of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And it only lives in our head. Like literally yesterday, just had this conversation with a girlfriend of mine who owns her own firm. And she was saying about how she didn't want to impose working on off hours for one of her employees.
Mhm.
She's like, I can do that for myself, but I take responsibility for and I've tried to set the stage so my employees don't feel that. And what I said to her is like, well, you've already done your part. The fact that if that employee feels that, that's actually on her, right?
Mhm.
Like that's the way that I look at it, right? Because sometimes we are given a lot of leeway and freedom to say, hey, like if for some reason you don't feel comfortable with that or if it doesn't work, let me know.
Mhm.
And even then we feel like, oh, we can't say anything. Like I still have to do whatever I'm told, even if you've been given that freedom. So what I said to her is like, if you as an employer have already communicated and already made it a safe space, you can't take that ownership of what somebody has in their head.
Mm.
And that's where I say, as individuals, as then on the employee side, we have the power to set boundaries and have that agency to say, like, I'm not going to let these stories in my head dictate my behaviors. I can just have a conversation and ask, like, maybe sometimes, like, oh, yeah, it's totally fine if you take off early. Like, that's not a
Mhm.
problem at all. Just have the conversation. Don't assume that it's going to be frowned upon if you do something because it might very well not be.
Now, you mentioned something very key when it comes to us generating all these scenarios of things that might happen, but most of the time, they're not even close. Why do you think that is? Why do you think we make those scenarios instead of having a conversation with our supervisor, our manager, our leader,
Mm.
whoever that is?
I mean, we're complex creatures as
Very,
humans,
very.
and our minds are very, very powerful, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's part of it is like our perception informs our reality,
Hmm.
whether it's true or not, right? Like if you have it in your mind that I don't like you, you
Hmm.
already have that in your mind, whether it's true or not,
Hmm.
right? Whatever I say, whatever I do, your mind's going to tell, oh, she said that because she doesn't like me. She's trying to make it more difficult because she doesn't like me. And if it's doesn't matter if it's like couldn't be further from the truth, but that perception informs your reality of what you're experiencing. Whatever I say or do is coming from a bad place because I don't like you. So I
Hmm.
think that's part of it. And then I think the other part of it too is just escaped me because it was kind of a twofold thing is I need to come back to me. Or the perception that you have. Can you remind me what your question?
Yes. So the question was, why do you think we make all these scenarios and most of the time they're not even true?
Maybe it is a reason, like self-preservation, right?
Okay.
Like I can say that about my experience in some situations, like I tend to be pessimistic
Hmm.
because like in my mind, that's the way my mind is protecting me to say like, if I already kind of plan for the worst thing, then I'm good. But the bad thing about that is if that's not going to be the outcome, then I just gave myself anxiety for nothing.
That is true.
And if it is the worst outcome, then I lived it twice because I lived it in my mind and then I lived it in
Hmm.
reality.
That's true.
So that's really helpful for me to think about it that way. It's like
Hmm.
just if I can't be neutral, at least try to be positive. And then if it's bad, then I only have to live it once. I don't
That
have
is
to
so
live it
true.
twice.
That is very true. Now, if someone is already in that situation right now, overthinking a lot, maybe they're the employee or maybe they're the leader. What is one thing that you would recommend that person to do to stop generating all these scenes that might not even play out.
It's something that I do, like on a coaching perspective, right?
Mhm.
Like if you were sharing something where I'm like, I don't know if that's true. My question for you would be, and I think this is something that individuals can do for themselves, is
Okay.
like ask yourself, okay, what makes that true? Right?
Mm,
If you're going back to my example of I don't like you.
yeah.
Okay, what makes that true? Like the way that she looks at me, or the way she does or doesn't say hi to me, or whatever it is, right? Or so and so told me something. Okay, like really examine that. How does that translate into I don't like you, right? Maybe that's the way I
Yeah.
look at everyone.
Everyone.
It has nothing to do with you, right? So it's a small example, right? But like, what makes that true? And
Mhm.
then really reflect on, okay, is that actually a valid? And maybe it is.
Mhm.
Maybe there was one time where I literally said, Luis, I don't like you. Okay, well, that is pretty black and white, right? Like, that's a good reason to
Mm,
believe that I don't like you because I
yes.
specifically told you that I don't like you. But
Mhm.
if it's not that clear cut, then maybe question why it is that you believe things are a certain way. Like that would be my advice, right? Is if we tend to overthink certain things and if we tend to think like, oh no, this is a bad scenario. Okay, why? Like what
Mhm.
makes that true? Literally write it down and then be like, okay, well, I guess that is not as like factual as
Yeah.
maybe I've made it to be in my head. And if you allow yourself to even be curious about it and
Mm,
think like, okay, maybe there's another answer, it can open up a world of possibilities, right? Because maybe in this scenario, like, no, I don't like you. But how does that affect what you do? Like,
mhm.
you can still be kind and cordial and welcoming. And whether I like you or not, like, how does that actually really
It's true.
affect you?
That is very true because a lot of the times when it comes to conversations, we just see what we want to see. And Sandra, when I met you, if I just see you and I just make a person of you in
Hmm.
my eyes, I'm like, oh, she doesn't like me. And you're like, no, like I was not even thinking about that. And I stay with that same
Hmm.
thought throughout everything, and this conversation wouldn't be happening. But what if I just try to interact, ask
Hmm.
questions? Because if you directly don't tell me I don't like you, Luis, there's a possibility that something might be happening in your life at
Hmm.
the current moment that you're just overthinking and not acknowledging people the way that you do, or maybe just that's just how you
Hmm.
are
Yeah.
until you make a relationship that you see fit that allows you to be you.
So this started off as a like a made up scenario,
Okay.
but that is my reality in that I'm very introverted and very shy. And only when I feel comfortable do I engage.
Mm.
And there's certain scenarios like we met through some networking activity, right? And in that particular group, I feel very comfortable. So it's easier for me. But probably the way most people actually experience me could be like, she's so stuck up or she's so that because I'm like, I will not initiate a conversation with you unless I feel very comfortable or if I sense that you are extremely uncomfortable. Then it's like my permission to be
Mm.
like, okay, let me help this person. Like if I can help them. Other than that, I'm like, not. So sorry. Like it rang a little bit too true. Most people, if you interact with me,
And awesome. She's awesome. And I've had a pleasure doing this conversation. Now, for the people that are listening, what do you hope they take away from your entire journey through life from beginning until you're right now? What would that be?
I really hope that people especially the ones that need it, right? There might be people that are in just a really good mind space, but that people can take away that they have ownership and agency in their path, because that's actually what will be the key to having some level of fulfillment and happiness, right? That's what I say is like you can't let other people define success for you
Mhm.
because
Ooh.
that will always be a moving target. But once you define success for yourself, like you know what that goal is, you're always acting in accordance with that. That's going to wind up bringing you happiness and fulfillment because you're working towards a specific target. So that's what I hope for people to find, that power and that agency to be able to define success for themselves.
That is good.
Right?
Because a lot of the times social media and all these things defining what success should be to me. But if I cannot define what success is to me, I'm always going to be chasing. And a lot of the times, the things that I'm currently doing for myself, maybe they're success to someone else. And I'm chasing something else when I'm already living it, and getting mentorship to define what success is, finding help. Now, what are you working on this year?
This year, multiple things. So one is building a community to help people design work that works for them. So historically, I've done one-on-one coaching, but this is now building out a community where people can interact with each other, bringing subject matter experts. So that's like one element. Still working on my leadership development, and sort of how this interaction came across was because I also have had aspirations for many years to start a podcast. And this is the year that
There you go.
we're doing it. And I'm also working on a small apparel line. So those are the things that I'm doing. I know it's
Hey, you got to make those nice apparel
yeah.
to define who you are, and keep on building the community of leaders, because everyone is a leader in their own right.
Exactly. And so that's sometimes people like, so you do leadership development, but you also do this thing with the work. And like, that is still leadership. That is still, you have to be the protagonist of your own story.
That's true.
So there's an element of leadership in that. If with nothing else, right? If you're not leading anybody, but you should be the leading lady or the leading man in your own story.
Yeah. We got to lead ourselves first before we can lead anyone else. Now, our last guest, without them knowing who our guest was going to be today, left a question.
Okay.
So you ready?
I hope.
So they said, if you had an opportunity to do anything else in your life, what would that be?
So one of my aspirations as a young child, which my mom actually supported and helped me with, but it never actually came to fruition, was I wanted to be an actress. Like I wanted to be on stage, like actually enjoy that. And I feel like that's a place where some of the introverted shyness like kind of goes away, because it's like, and it's not me, it's somebody else.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that would definitely be.
That would have been interesting.
I know. It would have been.
Like, would you been in like movies, like action movies, comedy?
I don't
what do you
know.
think?
All of it, except singing. I don't have a singing.
Hey, we can learn. We can learn.
But I mean, I think there's something so powerful in acting and being able to like be another version, because I'm also very much about like looking at other perspectives, right? My perspective is my perspective, informed by my experiences. Yours is going to be totally different based off of your experiences, right?
Correct.
And it's not that one is right and one is wrong. It's just a different perspective. And so I think I like that about acting, right? It's like now, like maybe I'd be playing this really, mean, grumpy character, but maybe in that person's story, like they grew up homeless or as an orphan, or they were abused, and like now that's made this grumpy person that you see before you. So I like the stories behind like just what you see. Yeah.
That is, now I'm interested in seeing you act, maybe take some classes or something like
is
that.
there community?
I'm sure there are. That'll be awesome. Okay, so I got a favor to ask you.
Okay.
And just like our previous guest shared a question, I would like for you to do the same thing for our future guest.
Oh, okay.
You don't know who it is.
Okay.
And there's the book right there that you can just do it on there. And at the same time, there's a postcard.
Okay.
And I would like for you to share a tip to your younger self.
Okay. So one is for the next guest, and then one is for
your younger
self.
What would you tell yourself? Okay. Sandra, thank you so much for opening up and sharing the chapters of your life. And in the future, we're going to come back because we're trying to build a diary of your entire journey. And I know you're working on the community, the business, the apparel, and I'm excited to hear more as the years progress. So thank you so much.
Awesome.
And then thank you to the listeners. And if the chapters that Sandra just shared with us, they helped you in some way, share that with someone else that might be in need of listening to this story so they know they're not alone. See you next chapter.